Welcome to this episode of the Truthful Fake podcast, in which we will discuss Russia's expansionism's deep historical roots that are shaping its interactions with its immediate neighbors and Eastern Europe, and posing a persistent challenge to European stability. If you find it informative, please click on the like button and share with others. We will explore Russia's imperial ambitions, both westward and eastward. We'll briefly examine the Soviet Union's continuation of these policies, and then delve into Vladimir Putin's reign, focusing on his aggressive actions, destabilization efforts, and the potential future threats to Europe. Russia's expansionist history began centuries ago with the Grand Duchy of Moscow, which laid the groundwork for a vast empire. In 1478, the conquest of Novgorod unified Russian principalities under Moscow's control, setting the stage for further territorial growth. The 1552 conquest of Kazan marked a pivotal moment, opening the Volga region and enabling expansion into the North Caucasus and Siberia. Eastward, from 1582 to 1650, Russian explorers and traders pushed into Siberia, driven by the lucrative fur trade and the quest for new lands, eventually reaching the Pacific Ocean. This eastward thrust continued into the 19th century, with Russia claiming Alaska, later sold to the United States in 1867, and extending its reach into Central Asia, incorporating Turkestan by 1885. Westward expansion was equally ambitious. Under Peter the Great in the early 18th century, Russia secured access to the Baltic Sea, founding St. Petersburg as a strategic foothold, while later Catherine the Great annexed Crimea in 1783 and partitioned Poland, absorbing significant portions of Eastern Europe into the Russian Empire. By the 19th century, Russia had grown into one of the world's largest empires, its borders stretching across two continents and influencing a vast array of cultures and territories. The Soviet Union, emerging after the 1917 Bolshevik Revolution, inherited and expanded this imperial legacy. Following World War II, the Soviet Union solidified its grip on Eastern Europe through the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact of 1939, which divided the region with Nazi Germany, allowing the annexation of the Baltic states, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, as well as eastern Poland and Bessarabia, modern-day Moldova. After the war, the Soviet Union established the Eastern Bloc, imposing communist governments in Poland, East Germany, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Romania, and Bulgaria. This network of satellite states, maintained through military presence and ideological enforcement, extended Soviet influence deep into Europe, creating a buffer zone against the West and ensuring dominance over its immediate neighbors. While the Soviet Union also pursued global influence through support for communist movements, its control over Eastern Europe remained a cornerstone of its expansionist policy until its dissolution in 1991. Under Vladimir Putin, who assumed power in 1999, Russia has revived and intensified these expansionist tendencies, particularly targeting its immediate neighbors and destabilizing Eastern Europe, with ripple effects threatening the broader European continent. Putin's reign has been marked by a combination of overt military aggression, covert hybrid warfare, and strategic coercion, reflecting a deliberate strategy to reassert Russian dominance and counter Western influence. His actions have not only reshaped the post-Soviet space, but also heightened Europe's security concerns. One of the earliest and most telling examples of Putin's aggression came in 2008 with the Russo-Georgian War. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, the Georgian state region of South Ossetia sought independence, leading to violent clashes between Georgian forces and Russian-supported and armed Ossetian separatists in the early 1990s. In August of that year, when Georgia launched an offensive against the separatists, Putin responded with a large-scale military invasion. Within 5 days, Russian forces, alongside South Ossetian and Abkhazian militias, expelled Georgian troops, occupied significant portions of Georgian territory, and inflicted widespread destruction. By August 12, a ceasefire was brokered, but Russia subsequently recognized South Ossetia and Abkhazia as independent states, stationing permanent military bases there. This move effectively severed these regions from Georgia, undermining its sovereignty and sending a clear message to other neighbors and NATO aspirants about Russia's readiness to use force to protect its sphere of influence. The war displaced over 192,000 people, with many unable to return, and established a precedent for Russia's willingness to redraw borders through military means. The annexation of Crimea in 2014 represents an even bolder escalation of Putin's expansionist agenda. Ukraine's Maidan Revolution in February 2014 ousted pro-Russian President Viktor Yanukovych, whose decision to abandon a political association and free trade agreement with the European Union in favor of closer ties with Russia was seen as a betrayal of Ukraine's pro-European aspirations and ignited protests in Kyiv's Independence Square. Russia moved aggressively to prevent Ukraine, which the Kremlin saw as a breakaway Russian satellite, from aligning with European democracies. While the pretext of NATO expansion was hollow, as Ukraine was unlikely to join NATO within the foreseeable future, Vladimir Putin sought to gain control of Black Sea territories he deemed important for Russia's military and trade routes. He also sought to gain territories that contained significant oil and gas reserves that could have competed with Russian exports to Europe. Just as importantly, he needed to bolster his waning popularity at home by appealing to nationalist sentiments and portraying Russia as a defender of the Russian-speaking people and Russia's lost imperial territories. On February 27, unmarked Russian special forces, later dubbed Little Green Men, seized key government buildings and military installations in Crimea. Within days, they had blockaded Ukrainian bases, and on March 16, a hastily organized referendum, conducted under occupation and widely criticized as fraudulent, claimed 95% support for joining Russia. 2 days later, on March 18, Putin formally annexed Crimea, citing historical ties and the protection of Russian-speaking populations. This illegal annexation, condemned by the United Nations General Assembly and met with Western sanctions, marked the first time since World War II that a European state had forcibly annexed territory from another. The move not only violated international law but also destabilized Ukraine, emboldening Russia to pursue further aggression in the region. The conflict in eastern Ukraine's Donbas region, which began shortly after Crimea's annexation, further exemplifies Putin's strategy of destabilizing neighbors to maintain influence. In April 2014, pro-Russian separatists, backed by Russian weapons, funding, and personnel, seized government buildings in Donetsk and Luhansk, declaring the Donetsk People's Republic and Luhansk People's Republic. Russia's involvement was initially covert, with volunteers and mercenaries crossing the border, but evidence soon mounted of direct military support, including the deployment of regular Russian troops during key battles like Ilovaisk in August 2014, where Ukrainian forces suffered heavy losses. The downing of Malaysia Airlines flight MH17 on July 17, 2014, by a Russian-supplied Buk missile, killing all 298 aboard, underscored the conflict's international ramifications. By early 2022, the war had claimed over 14,000 lives, displaced 1.5 million people, and created a frozen conflict zone, with Russia maintaining de facto control through proxies. This protracted instability has kept Ukraine vulnerable, draining its resources and blocking its path toward EU and NATO integration. Beyond direct military interventions, Putin has employed hybrid warfare tactics to extend Russia's destabilizing influence into Europe. Cyberattacks have been a prominent tool in this arsenal. The 2017 NotPetya cyberattack, initially targeting Ukraine, spiraled into a global crisis, infecting systems in Europe and beyond with ransomware disguised as legitimate software. Companies like Maersk in Denmark and Merck in Germany suffered losses in the billions, while Ukraine's infrastructure, including banks and power grids, was crippled. Similarly, on February 23, 2022, just before Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, a cyberattack on Viasat's satellite network disrupted communications across Europe, affecting wind farms in Germany and government services in multiple countries. These incidents demonstrate Russia's capacity to inflict widespread disruption, targeting not just immediate neighbors, but also Europe's critical infrastructure. Disinformation campaigns have been another cornerstone of Putin's strategy, aimed at weakening European cohesion and amplifying internal divisions. Russia has leveraged state-controlled media outlets like RT and Sputnik, alongside troll farms and bot networks, to spread false narratives. During the 2020 coronavirus pandemic, Russian disinformation falsely claimed the EU was collapsing under the crisis, targeting countries like Italy and Spain to erode trust in European institutions. In the 2016 Brexit referendum, Russian-linked accounts amplified divisive content, while in France's 2017 election, Kremlin-backed efforts supported far-right candidate Marine Le Pen, including hacked leaks targeting Emmanuel Macron. In 2023, Bulgaria uncovered a Russian-orchestrated campaign spreading anti-EU and pro-Russian propaganda, illustrating the ongoing effort to polarize European societies and undermine democratic processes. Energy coercion has further amplified Russia's leverage over Europe, exploiting the continent's dependence on Russian gas and oil. In January 2006, Russia cut gas supplies to Ukraine amid a pricing dispute, reducing flows to Europe by 30% during a harsh winter, affecting countries like Hungary and Poland. A similar cutoff in 2009 disrupted supplies to 18 European nations, forcing temporary shutdowns of industries and heating systems. The Nord Stream 2 pipeline, completed in 2021 but never operational due to sanctions, was designed to bypass Ukraine and increase Europe's reliance on Russian gas. In 2022, Russia delayed the return of Nord Stream 1 after maintenance, exacerbating an energy crisis as prices soared, a move the White House labeled as using energy as a weapon. Even as Europe reduced its reliance on Russian gas by 94% since 2022, Russia still supplied 18% of EU gas imports by late 2024, retaining significant influence over energy markets. Looking to the future, Russia's actions under Putin are unlikely to change, especially given the Trump administration's strange overtures to Putin and promises to ease sanctions. If you are interested in exploring the possible reasons for it, take a look at the episode titled Trump's Greater Israel here. The Russian population remains deeply nationalist and suspicious of the West, and broadly appears to support Putin's aggression against Ukraine. The Institute for the Study of War, ISW, reports that in 2025 the Russian public is increasingly supportive of continuing the war until Ukraine's full capitulation, with 46% now rejecting the withdrawal of Russian troops, according to a Chronicles poll conducted between February 5th and February 13th. Thus, in the foreseeable future, Russia is likely to continue to pose a range of continuing threats to Europe. In addition to expanding hybrid attacks, energy remains a potent weapon, with potential supply manipulations and disruptions capable of destabilizing European economies, particularly in Eastern Europe, where infrastructure ties to Russia persist. Militarily, Russia could escalate tensions in the Baltic states, where ethnic Russian minorities provide a pretext for intervention, or in Belarus, where integration efforts could expand Russia's forward presence. The ongoing war in Ukraine, intensified by the 2022 invasion, could spill over, with refugee flows and economic strain testing European unity. Hybrid threats, cyberattacks on critical infrastructure like power grids or financial systems, and disinformation targeting elections could further erode stability, especially as Europe faces internal challenges like populism and economic recovery. Russia's strategic partnership with China, evidenced by joint military drills and trade agreements, might also embolden its posture, complicating Europe's response. Europe must counter these threats through a multifaceted approach, diversifying energy sources with liquefied natural gas imports, nuclear energy and renewables, bolstering cybersecurity with coordinated defenses, and reinforcing NATO and EU solidarity with increased military support for frontline states like Ukraine and Georgia. Supporting democratic resilience through media literacy and counter-disinformation efforts that do not include censorship will be equally critical. Russia's expansionist history, revitalized under Putin's aggressive and destabilizing leadership, underscores the urgency of a united European strategy as part of a broader Western alliance to safeguard its security and sovereignty in the face of a growing challenge. Thank you for making it to the end of this analysis. Please subscribe, like, and share.